Hey everyone, welcome to Deckheads. I'm Tim, aka Pirate Tom.
And I'm Frank, also known as my girlfriend.
On Deckheads, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at several tabletop strategy games.
So after an introductory video where we show you the basic rules of the game, we'll go ahead and play a series of 4 games against each other.
After each game, we'll have a brief discussion of strategy, not only what happened in that particular game, but just in the general theme of the game that we're playing.
After playing our series of games, we'll then decide if there are other elements of the game we have yet to explore and if we'll continue to play it or if we'll just move on to the next strategy game.
For the first game, we're going to go with Android Netrunner, a living card game published by Fantasy Flight Games and developed by Richard Garfield, the creator of Magic the Gathering.
One of the things that really sets Android Netrunner apart as a strategy game is that both sides are very asymmetric. You have very different teams playing against each other.
Also unique about Android Netrunner is that it's a living card game. The living card game model was developed by Fantasy Flight in response to collective card game or trading card games. Usually with those types, you have to buy a starter deck, and then if you want any more cards to bolster your deck, you have to go out and buy booster packs. And you don't know what's going to be in those booster packs, and they could be expensive.
So the main way that the model is changed is that when you first pick up the game, you buy a box that includes enough for both players and several different modes of play.
And then over time, they'll release more cards, sometimes in big expansions which have a substantial number of cards, and sometimes in smaller data packs. Data packs are kind of like booster packs from the TCG model, but the difference is that you know exactly what you're getting going in, and the price per card is substantially smaller.
So, going into Android Netrunner itself, it's a game that takes place in a cyberpunk setting, for those familiar with it. And the main players are the corporations that control this world and the runners who seek to hack them and earn information on them.
So that's how it's asymmetrical. You've got one player playing a corrupt corporation who's trying to push secret agendas, and the other player playing a netrunner who's trying to, or what they call a netrunner, who's essentially a hacker who's trying to expose the agendas and steal them for themselves.
So I will be playing as the corporation for this video and for the next one. So what we have is a series of what are called servers that the corporation is protecting. And the hacker or the netrunner is trying to access these servers to get the agendas of the corporation. My goal is to push my agendas and earn enough agenda points to win the game. I can't simply place my agendas down and earn the points. I have to place them and advance them, which is why they need protection. The advancement cost is always shown in the upper right corner of the agenda card, and its victory points is shown in the left corner of the picture. So for example, on this security force, it's worth 2 victory points, and it will cost 4 advancement in order to get that. Now, as we'll learn later, that will take me at least 2 turns to complete. So to protect my agendas, I have to place what are known as ice. Each ice can have 1 or more subroutines that will have an effect on the netrunner. The netrunner, if they overcome the strength of the ice, can disable each subroutine in order to avoid its effects. In order to activate these ice, I also have to pay a cost. The ice doesn't just protect my agendas, which are housed on remote servers. They also protect my hand, called HQ, my deck, called R&D, and my discard, which is known as the archives. All of these are vulnerable to attack by the runner, and I need to protect all of them. Now, it's not only that my agendas can go on my servers. I can also install cards called assets, which give me effects after they're completed, such as this card, which allows me to get a lot of extra money. You can also add upgrades to the servers, such as Akitaro here, who will decrease the cost of my ice. These upgrades are separate from assets or agendas, and I can have as many upgrades on a remote server as I wish. The final card type available to the corporation is the operation. Operations are played from the hand as an action, and they will allow me to gain certain other effects. Now, depending on what corporation you choose, each corporation will give you another effect, and that's the card that represents your HQ. So for the Jinteki, they get the ability that whenever an agenda is scored or stolen, they also deal 1 net damage. We'll get to what that means later.
So Frank went over the different types of cards that the corporation has, the agendas and assets, and the ice protecting them. So I'll go ahead and go over the cards that the runner has. These allow me to make runs on or hacks on the corporation servers and hopefully steal their agendas. The most important cards that the runner has are their programs. A lot of the programs are called icebreakers, and those allow me to encounter and hopefully break the subroutines on the different ice. So all ice has a strength and all icebreakers have a strength. To encounter a piece of ice, the icebreaker that I'm using has to have a strength equal to or greater than the ice's strength. Most icebreakers have a relatively low strength, but allow you to boost their strength to encounter those bigger, badder pieces of ice. Frank mentioned the different types of ice, such as code gate or barrier. Well, there's different types of icebreakers as well. For example, this one lets me break barriers, this one lets me break sentries, and sometimes there's even all-purpose icebreakers that let you break through anything, but they're generally more expensive and use a lot more resources to use. The next kind of card for the runner is hardware. Hardware gives you more memory to allow you to install more and better icebreakers or programs, any type of program, but it also gives you other passive bonuses. Down at the bottom here are resources. Resources will give other passive bonuses to the runner, but are more vulnerable to attack from the corporation in certain circumstances. Similar to how the corporation has an identity card, so does the runner. Each runner has a different bonus, such as Kate McCaffrey's here. Her bonus is to lower the install cost of your first program or piece of hardware by 1 each turn. That's a very handy bonus, especially for her faction, which uses a lot of different hardware and programs. So just like the corporation has the HQ, the R&D, and the archives, the runner has the stack, the heap, and the grip.
So the game focuses on managing 2 key resources. You have your actions per turn, called clicks, and you have your credits, which are the currency that you spend to activate cards or install hardware. With the clicks, there's even a difference between factions. The corporations only have 3 clicks per turn, where the runners get 4.
However, the corporation draws a card at the beginning of their turn before they do any of their clicks, whereas the runner has to use a click to draw a card.
That said, each click can be used in multiple ways, and each faction uses it differently. For example, the corporation can use a click to draw a card, to generate a single credit, to install an agenda, asset, or ice, and if that causes any costs, they have to pay that at the same time. They can also use it to advance an agenda. As you can see here, these 2 tokens were credits used to advance. And if the runner has established any viruses, something that comes up on certain cards, they can spend all 3 actions to remove those. And finally, if I have placed tags on the runner, I can use an action and 2 credits to begin trashing their resources.
The runner has their own set of actions, some of which are similar to the corporations, such as drawing a card or getting a credit, but they can also do things such as install a program or piece of hardware. They can play an event card, which is another type of card that the runner has, which is similar to the corporation's operation, which is basically it takes an action and has a cost and is just something that happens immediately. The runner can spend a click and 2 credits to remove a tag, as Frank just mentioned, or they can make a run. Making a run is essentially making an attempt at hacking a server of the corporations. The core of the game happens during these runs, and all interaction between the players happens during these runs.
And so it's during these runs that you see things like the ice get activated and the programs get used. So it really is the heart of the game. One of the important subroutine effects is a trace. And a trace will have a base value, say trace 3. That will go immediately up against the runner's link, say for example link 2. Now, what happens first in the trace is the corporation will add credits to bolster their trace value. Then, the runner is allowed to respond by adding as many credits as they wish to overcome it. Now, like in baseball, all ties go to the runner. If successful, each trace will have a different effect, but the most common of which is to place a tag on the runner. Tags, as discussed before, allow the corporation to begin to destroy the runner's resources unless the runner is willing to pay the credits and clicks to remove them. Certain cards that different corporations have may also capitalize on the number of tags on a runner.
There are other cards in the runner's disposal that sometimes help them get rid of tags as well. So just like how the runner can be tagged, the corporation can get bad publicity. Oftentimes during runs, the runner has to use credits to bolster the strength of their icebreakers or to break subroutines. So for every bad publicity that the corporation has, the runner gets what's called a recurring credit. And it's essentially a credit that they get to use during a run. If they don't use it, they lose it, but it's there for every single run.
One of the other effects that ice can have in its subroutines is dealing damage, and there are 3 kinds of damage: net, meat, and brain. And the difference between net and meat damage is name only. This is only for what kinds of cards deal and protect from it. But the actual effect is the same. For each point of damage dealt, the runner loses 1 card from their grip. However, if the runner does not have enough cards from their hand to sacrifice to soak the net or meat damage, they flatline and the corporation wins the game. The last kind of damage is brain damage. And what brain damage does is it decreases the maximum hand limit of the runner by 1, in addition to making them lose a card. Once the runner has been dealt 5 brain damage and their maximum hand size goes down below 0, the game is over and the corporation wins.
They're dead, flatline, just like any other type of damage if they get reduced below 0 cards. So now what we're going to do is we're going to show you an example run. I'm going to make a run on Frank's server that we have set up. He has advanced it a couple times and he's got it pretty well protected, so I'm assuming it's an agenda. It could be a trap, but we'll see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a click to make a run on that server.
Now, I get to choose whether or not I want to res the ice. I may have installed it, but it's not necessarily active. I go ahead and check, and this ice, Chum, has a cost of 1. Now I also have an upgrade here that reduces the cost of rezzing ice on this server by 2, making that Chum free to activate. I'll go ahead and activate it.
So I would first encounter this ice and compare any icebreaker strength to its strength. However, it is a code gate, and I currently don't have an icebreaker that can break a code gate. So I wouldn't be able to break through this ice no matter what the subroutine is going to activate.
The subroutine on Chum makes it so that way the following ice in the series has +2 strength, and if the runner fails to break every subroutine on the next ice, they will take 3 net damage. Now, currently, Tim only has 2 cards in his hand, and that would end the game and allow me to win.
So generally, after encountering a piece of ice, a runner can choose to jack out instead of continuing on to the next piece of ice. Obviously, if there was no other ice in the way and the next thing for them to encounter would be the server that they're making the run on, they would not jack out. That would be silly. But in this case, I'm not going to jack out because I really want to access that server there. So I'm going to keep going.
That allows me again to make the same choice. Do I res this ice or do I let it sit? Now, this next ice has a cost of 4. My upgrade decreases it by 2, so I will go ahead and spend 2 credits, sending them to the bank, and activating my Neural Katana. My Neural Katana is a sentry that has only 1 subroutine, do 3 net damage. That means, in addition to Chum, if this subroutine is not broken, it will do 6 net damage. Well enough to kill Tim. And it has a strength of 3 increased by 2, giving it a total strength of 5.
So I have to break this subroutine, because if I don't, game's over. The Neural Katana is a sentry, and I do have a sentry icebreaker, but its strength is only 1. The Neural Katana was just boosted from 3 to 5, which means I have to get the strength of this icebreaker up to 5. On the card it says I can spend 2 credits to increase its strength by 1 for the remainder of this run, so I'm going to have to spend a lot of money to get it up to 5. I will spend 8 in total. So there's 6, and I'm also going to use these 2 recurring credits which are provided to me by this piece of hardware here. Now these recurring credits are allowed to be used when boosting icebreakers, so I can do that. So that's 8 credits total, so my strength of this icebreaker is now 5, so it will be able to interact with the Neural Katana, and then it costs 1 credit, additional credit, to break any sentry subroutine which I'm doing. So I'm now able to access that agenda.
I have no choice, and I must show the agenda. Or asset, as it may be.
But it turns out it is an agenda. So that means I immediately steal this, and I get to access the upgrade as well, and I can spend 3 credits to trash it because it has a trash cost of 3, but I'm not going to do that in this case. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to make another run on his R&D. That would be his deck.
Now, my R&D already has a rezzed ice available to it, a Wall of Thorns. This one was pretty expensive. It has a strength of 5, it's a barrier, and it has 2 subroutines. One of them which does 2 net damage, enough to empty Tim's hand, but not enough to end him. And the final subroutine ends the run, just makes him have to leave.
So because I'm doing another run, I'll clean up these credits that I spent on the previous run and get these 2 reoccurring credits back. So it just so happens that I have the battering ram, which is the perfect icebreaker to deal with this piece of ice. It has a strength of 3, and it requires a strength of 5, but it only requires 1 credit to bump up the strength. So I can actually use my 2 recurring credits to bump the strength up to 5, and then I spend 2 more credits to break 2 barrier subroutines. So it only costs 2 credits to break 2 subroutines. 1 credit per subroutine, and that lets me access his R&D.
Accessing my R&D allows him to take a look at the top card, and he will be subject to whatever effects it has. If it's an agenda, he immediately gets to take it and it scores for him. There are a few cards in the Jinteki deck that are actually traps that will hurt him if he interacts with them. And other times he just gets to look at it and put it away. If it has a trashable cost, such as my upgrade, he can destroy it by paying after looking at R&D. But he does not have to tell me what it was unless the card says so.
So that was an example run, and as I mentioned earlier, running is what makes up the main part of the game. So I think we've gone over enough rules and basics of the game that you should be able to follow along while we're playing the game.
One of the other more advanced techniques that we didn't really go into here is deck building. Each identity card becomes the main heart of a deck. It shows the minimum deck and the amount of non-related cards you're allowed to include in that. And some of our later videos may include reconstructed decks.
So when he says non-related, there's different factions for each of the different roles. So there's different factions of corporation and different factions of runners. So for example, you can see these cards here, these are all green. They're the Shaper faction, but the cards in my hand, they're all orange, and this is the Anarchist faction. So each card has a cost on it, and that is an influence cost. And as Frank mentioned, each identity card has an max influence they can have in their deck, which means you can have up to that influence cost of the cards that are non-faction, which creates interesting decks that can be built. In addition to non-faction cards, there's also neutral cards, which have a white background that can be used in any faction.
There's also no upper limit on the amount of cards in your deck, but as any deck builder will tell you, the more cards that are in the deck, the less consistent a deck will become.
Consistency is everything in deck building.
We feel that the game has a great deal of strategy available to it, and we're looking forward to exploring these avenues in the next few videos.
Next time on Deckheads.
Hey everyone, welcome to
What were you going to say?
welcome to Pirate Tom.
I'm Deckheads.
I'm Tim A. Hey, Deckheads.